So the ability to generate comes from frameworks. A consistency in how you approach an issue. There are certain principles, there are certain concepts. You have to continuously use those concepts to apply those principles and generate answers. Okay. So in today's class, you will feel like you have already seen all of these concepts. Why are we repeating again? The agenda of this lecture is not to summarize. I keep telling the same thing. It is a practice session for you to think consistently for a topic across different subject. Okay? And your ability to continuously interlink this from one area to another. Did you get my point? Clear? This is the agenda for the day. So I want you to answer my questions, participate in the session, so that you develop that knack to apply those concepts and principles. Okay? Chalo. Now, joint polls are constitutional, but they question the sweeping powers of election commission. Can you tell me, even before reading the gist of this article, I want you to think, looking at the headline, to which syllabus area you can tag this? See, the ability to do this comes from one aspect. First of all, you have to by heart your syllabus, verbatim, line by line. Where will you talk about elections in main syllabus? RPA, Representation of People Act. There is a separate syllabus pointer in GS2, line item. Okay, now we have RPA. What is the news article about? Joint polls, meaning the concept of one nation, one election. Okay? Is it constitutional or not? Who asked this question and who decides? Who is the interpreter of the constitution? So, ex-CJIs are giving a statement. Ex-CJIs. So, is this a statement from Supreme Court? It's a statement from legal luminaries who have some weight, who have some weightage in policy making. Their opinion will come into the picture. Okay. On the other hand, they are questioning the sweeping powers to election commission. What are the sweeping powers? See, what is the purpose of election commission? From many days we are looking at this. In your GS2 syllabus, the prerequisite to analyze this is you have to master constitutional bodies. In that constitutional body, you have to understand the purpose of Election Commission of India, how election commissioners are appointed, the latest controversies, the structure and existence and the purpose with which election commission exists. You have to know these points. Okay? If you don't know, go back to your Lakshmikant, and this is my answer. Go to Lakshmikant and tell me where exactly you are finding this. Article 324, 325, 326 in that Lakshmikant chapter, where exactly would you find election commission, and see how election commissioners are appointed. Recently, there is a change, like a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, there is a change in the methodology of how election commissioners are appointed. What is the impact of that change? Because election commission is a body which is supposed to be independent of the government activities. And if something happens, how does that independence come into existence? Through transparency and accountability frameworks. You need certain methodology, certain framework for checks and balances. As an institution, if election commission is supposed to be independent, it should not have the dependency on the government, the salaries, the methodology of removal, their job security, their tenure, all of this should be not there in the hands of government. Irrespective of it, it should go on. And if election commissioners are supposed to be removed, the process should not be arbitrary. And these are the prerequisite conditions for an election commission to function independently. Why is this important? Because in a democracy, free and fair elections decide the quality of democracy. Free and fair. And the body that decides this is election commission. If that very body is dependent on the government, what is the problem? This was one debate. After that, the next issue was one nation, one election. In this one nation, one election issue, the biggest problem was how do we conduct this? Because one time, conducting the election across the country is okay for parliamentary elections. Even in parliament elections, it happens phase wise. It doesn't happen in a single sitting. Okay, let's say you deploy the same methodology for both state election. It happens in many states. Simultaneously, state elections will happen and MP elections will happen. Telugu states saw the same trend. Okay. If the government, collapses in the middle of the term, what is the situation then? Are you saying that after 2 years, if the coalition government splits? Because democracy thrives on that flexibility and adaptability, where the will of people is always represented indirectly. It's a direct election, but are people directly participating in decision making? No. You're still outsourcing it to someone. So there is an element. Let's say, for example, if a voter X wants a certain agenda to be fulfilled, the only way that can be done is he can vote to that MP who will support that agenda. But can the voter ensure that this agenda is actually fulfilled in the parliament? No. It completely depends on the party ideology and its execution. So democracy is now reduced to a number game. Correct. So in that situation, if in the middle of the term a government collapses because of lack of confidence or something, for example, the present government is a coalition government, what will happen if in the middle of the term, somewhere around 2.5, 3 years, the government collapses? What do we do? Are we going to wait for 2.5 years to conduct an election? Is that a good state to be in? If that is not the case, what are the other alternatives? The biggest question of one nation, one election is this, and there are no convincing answers. Logistically, it is something that we can figure out, because in 1951, when the population of this country and the literacy rates are so low, literacy rate is low, population is high, and everybody thought India does not have a chance at surviving. Democracy in India, according to Winston Churchill, cannot survive more than a few years. Time and again, we have proved them wrong. How? Because we had solid institutions. I'm telling the backstory behind because you have to understand. This is like a narrative that you have to keep on revisiting. Otherwise, this news will be out of your memory in a few days. You are not supposed to rely on your memory, you are supposed to rely on your understanding. If I place this news like a small block and put it under a story, like a missing puzzle, that's when you will remember this. So, what are the CJIs worried about? Take a look at this. If you are not able to look at it, I will read it out. Just see that. Appearing before the Joint Committee of Parliament on One Nation, One Election. News again. Here, homework. When do we have joint committees? Go to your Lakshmikant Parliament chapter, revise. Why do we need a joint committee? The answer is given there. Please go and read it once again to make sense of this news. Why do we need a joint committee? Okay. Have red flagged the vast powers that the election commission holds in the proposed law for holding simultaneous elections. Okay, it talks about a law where one body has immense powers. So, if there is an asymmetric sharing of powers, if the body becomes too powerful, what concept are we threatening in polity? Checks and balances. So, if a law gives disproportionate powers to any party in this whole fiasco or any legal issue, the concept, the problem there is checks and balances goes for a toss. That is what the article is saying. What is the proposed law? You have to do the background work there. What is the proposed law? There is Ramnath Kovind panel. Ramnath Kovind panel on simultaneous elections. The ex-president. There is a panel which says, there is a committee. It's a report. It's a very huge report, but just read the gist of it. That committee examined, I want you to write this down because this whole issue of one nation, one election is a debate that will continue for another few years. Till you crack your exam, this news will be relevant. So, this is a very lengthy debate. You will time and again visit this. And there is one more danger here. Some aspirants will have an emotional attachment and debate because they spend a lot of time on this. So what happens? They continuously sit and do more and more research because they're already familiar with it. They want to sound more like an expert in that subject. Do not fall into that trap. Because you are here to clear the exam, not to become a legal luminary. You are not here for a constitutional expertise. There will be compilations, etc. But you have to develop that knack of observing the right points, developing the knack for picking up what is the conflict at question here, what are the concepts that are going wrong. Once you understand the method, you will see the constitution and see the principles that are established in constitution are different and the processes that we are following is different, which is a subversion of the concept of rule of law, checks and balances. Usually these are the two most important concepts when laws are made. Rule of law, this is about execution. This is about legislation. If both are gone, democracy becomes a joke. For execution, you need accountability. For checks and balances, you need separation of powers. For any law, this is the funda. For rule of law, it is important for executing a task. For the executive, you need to follow the rule of law. For example, there is a police station. What will happen if rule of law is not followed? You have seen the case in Tamil Nadu, custodial death, torture, third degree torture, to the extent that the person is killed without filing an FIR. How can you do that? How can you arrest a person? Who gave you so much power? What if that person is innocent? Even if the person is, a thief, do you torture someone so much? What is the principle there? Doctrine of proportionality. Because the whole purpose of why our justice system exists is to not punish, to correct the person's behavior. That funda itself is gone for a toss and there is no correction, there is no rule of law. That becomes anarchy, lawlessness. Why do you think in that social contract people will have any trust in the police? And in that kind of a state, what kind of system are we building for the future generations? Institutions will rot when there is no rule of law. Correct. Similarly, if there are no checks and balances, when majoritarian tendencies are reflecting in lawmaking, the bodies that are supposed to protect these tendencies, when they are given power, so much power, the quality of democracy is again going for a toss. So the importance of constitutional bodies, importance of the argument of the philosophy as to why these institutions are important, and the role of different stakeholders in protecting the sanctity of those institutions, this needs to be factored in. In the absence of these factorial considerations, the system will collapse. This news article should not be viewed just as a news. The logic that these chief justices are giving needs to be understood and imbibed and applied in the context of rule of law, checks and balances, and the basics of election commission. Am I clear? So this is how you are supposed to read this article. Go through the article once again. Okay? What is Article 82 saying? What are the articles quoted here? Look at the arguments, understand and internalize so that you don't have to by heart. I told you the entire story behind this. And every day I keep repeating the story because people might find it difficult to apply the concept in that news article. And I repeat them day in and day out so that in the long term it becomes very natural to you. Because at the end of the day, no matter how many questions are asked, it is invariably about this concept application only that you will be tested in mains. It's a very predictable thing, but you have to train your mind daily, every day on this news articles, and that is how I want you to absorb. Once the concept is so strong in your mind, you will react quickly. It won't take a lot of time. You will see things very clearly. By now, you must have understood. People who are following the methodology that I am suggesting from a couple of months. Some of you are regular. Don't you see a change in your thought process? Isn't it easy to react quickly and understand how to use this article? If you do not develop the ability to use any article and develop a sense of judgment as to what you should be picking up from that article, you will continue to struggle. Okay? Fine. Okay. This one. As America slips, the US is undermining what made it great. What are the opportunities for India? I will take a step back and put things into context here before we appreciate the article. What is foreign policy all about? Can you tell me? What is the purpose of having a foreign policy? What is a policy? What is a policy? Can you tell me what is there inside a policy? Welfare of the people. What is there in foreign policy? Very specifically, I'm asking welfare of the people is fine. It's a very general answer. Okay. Any other answer? Plan of action. Exactly. Policy purpose is to first list down the problems. And give solutions. How? Through a plan of action. You need to have an actionable agenda. This is the purpose of a policy. Let's say national policy on children, national policy on old age people, national policy on women, foreign policy, national security doctrine. What are all of this? It's a compilation of the list of problems. The other day I asked you to do the homework, national policy on intellectual property rights. What is there in that document? If you have done it, you will understand. First, any policy document will clearly delineate the list of issues identified, and the list of proposed solutions. What are editorials? It's a critique on why some provisions will work, will not work, or why they are not being executed, and how to make them better. You identified a list of problems, and then you identified some solutions. Then newspaper articles will come into the picture and say, boss, this is what you promised, you are not giving me that. This is the reason, this is a list of reasons why I think this is wrong, and therefore I propose this as a fix to this problem. And this is the methodology you need to follow for almost every subject. Your ability to articulate a problem, first identifying the problem, articulate the problem in a very short way, thinking of a solution through concepts, then reading newspaper articles with the ability to identify if the criticism is valid or not, and then looking at a solution, maybe from some other article or some other source. You won't have all of them in a single place. Maybe the article writer has an affinity for one of the provisions in the policy. If there are 10 policy objectives, they will pick up one policy objective and see what is the solution proposed by the government. Then it will go on critiquing that, citing many areas. As an aspirant, your job is not to get carried away by that lengthy argument and say this is the entire problem. Editorials often focus on some aspects which will gain national traction, which are considered to be important for them. Yes, there are weak points in that policy, and that's why they get criticized often. For example, I'll talk about one news item that is coming up. Maybe I will discuss it there. But if the institutions which are existing to ensure that a policy is meeting its end objective, if the members who are a part of those institutions are again controlled by the government, where is the room for criticism? Where is the scope for improvement? So there needs to be checks and balances and separation of powers even there. Ultimately, democracy is about accountability and transparency, not about distribution of power. It is not enough just to be represented. It is important for outcomes to be measured. Your worth in a democracy as a policy maker depends on outcomes, not representation. Representation is the beginning point, not the end point. A lot of debates focus only till this point. Okay, so this is the policy. Okay, understanding what is policy, why is policy important. Now let's extrapolate the same understanding to foreign policy. What is foreign policy? By this definition, you should understand by now, foreign policy is a document which will list down the vulnerabilities of India. These are the problems that India will be facing from neighborhood, from different countries, from different big powers, from economic angle, from security angle, from technology angle, and cultural angle, which will disturb the peace in India, welfare agenda in India. Our objective should be to not only safeguard ourselves but also spread the values that we stand for. Every country will try to do that. What are the values that India stands for? If India, do you see any history of imperialism in India? Not much, except for Cholas who tried to navigate the seas in the 12th century. And there is a reason behind that. Our scriptures have culturally refrained people from moving across the seas, because if they move out of the sea, it is like you are abandoning your motherland and going elsewhere. And to enforce that kind of restriction, there were some caste rules. that if you move out of your homeland, you will be socially ostracized. Because look at the fundamental philosophy of Indians. It is about renunciation. What do you mean by renunciation? Ultimate philosophy of Indian civilization, as we know, is about letting things go, not trying to store more and more. If you see the traditional salient features of Indian society when you are studying them, there are 4 phases in life: Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and finally Sannyasa. Sannyasa means liberation. As a country which predominantly, no matter what philosophy we are talking about, take a look at great kings. Chandragupta Maurya, for example. How did he spend his last days? He gave up the kingdom, walked away. Because Indian philosophy, as such, the values that we stand for, is not about consumerism. Our philosophy, our value system respects the limitation of nature and imposes conditions and regulates social behavior. Of course, it becomes dogma in the long run. When you don't tell the intent of a law, or if you don't tell the intent of a norm, cultural institution, it will become a superstition in the long run. Okay, so Indian foreign policy was never about occupying territories. It was about conserving and spreading the values that we stand for. A case to the point being Ashoka's Dhamma. We were giving the ideals of Dhamma to the world out there. And that's a important feature of how India conducted its foreign policy across generations. Today, we are not here to take up imperial ambitions and expand our territory. That's not our intent. The intent is to protect what is ours, protect the value system, protect the interests of Indians. And that's why we have adopted a strategy called realism, realpolitik, or strategic autonomy. Clear? Now, to achieve this, you have to respond to the global realities. In the absence of a unifying framework as to how we should conduct ourselves, that becomes slightly difficult. I will use this article to tell why it is becoming difficult sometimes. In diplomatic relations, if you clearly lay down that this is how I want to conduct my foreign policy, certain value systems, we do have scattered documents here and there, official statements, but we do not have a single document which says this is our foreign policy. And there is a reason for that, because it is difficult to create a foreign policy that will satisfy the needs of the diversity of this country, because something happening elsewhere will have an impact here. For example, Israel war is happening. People here develop affinity towards one party or the other. If you develop a rigid foreign policy stance, it is difficult to satisfy the agitation here. But in the absence of a unifying framework, at least in terms of intent, it is becoming difficult to navigate the complexity of the modern world. One of the complexity for now is how do we deal with US? Because let me tell you how US came into existence. US is a land of immigration. It's not like people who were always there are the ones building the nation today. Who are the original people staying there? The tribes. They're called Indians. They are also called Indians, Red Indians. The native tribes who are residing in the both the American continents have literally been marginalized. Their lands were taken away. They were pushed to a corner. And the people who came there are actually from elsewhere. They will have their origins rooted to Europe. And in such a huge piece of land, people came in with only one objective. The so-called American dream is all about wealth creation, and it is based on meritocracy. Sure, there is definitely opportunities for growth unlike elsewhere in the world, and the whole idea of American dream and the patriotism to the nation is contingent on how much the nation will provide the opportunity. In the present scheme of things, that is going for a toss, because the President of the United States does not want to handle the issues smoothly. The threat and the nature of diplomacy is not very conducive for the very principles by which America grew. There are some case studies here. According to this article, America grew because of three main reasons. One, rewarding meritocracy. Two, economy. Three, universities. The so-called Ivy League universities, the best in the world, are there in US because they receive huge funding. They get funding from philanthropists, from the government. And on the top of it, you also have attraction from across the globe. The best of the talent are going to the US, and they are supported, they are well funded. And of course, because of all these reasons, they are reaping the benefits. Now, with the nature of diplomacy, these institutions are suffering, they are not getting funds. What is the difference between American universities and other universities in that case? You won't have a difference, right? When you don't get funding, what will the talent do there? That's a problem. Second, tariffs, economy. What's happening on that front? Trump is continuously imposing tariffs, which is rising the costs, disrupting the trade relations. It's a temporary pain because ultimately it will bleed US as well, because the trust in the country will get eroded. Yes, short-term disruption will be there, but do you really think investors, even in the US, if they are bleeding, if their systems are getting disrupted, they will stay in America forever? Obviously not. Either he should be thrown out of the office, or if that is not possible, they will move their entire production across different parts of the world and create global value chains. Meaning, if there are 10 steps in the process, each step can be in 10 different countries, and this is optimized in a way that it will reduce the overall cost. And India can leverage this opportunity. There is a term called intellectual tribalism. Please note this, intellectual tribalism. I've posted this even on the Telegram channel, you can go through that. Intellectual tribe, what is a tribe? Tribe is a group of people coming together, having a similar ideology, staying together. They live in small communities. When it comes to scientific temper, research, logic, you cannot have these debates, I am right, you are wrong. That kind of a debate cannot exist in science, because science is universal. Do you think Newton's third law will change in America and India? For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Will that change in US? Will that change in India? As long as we are talking about physics and not culture, that law holds valid. In India, if, for example, if someone threatens, at max, they might slap the other person, just like how Maharashtra, issue happened, where the politician slapped. But in the US, you might get gunned down. Slap is definitely better than a gunshot. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction may not hold true when it comes to culture. But as long as we're talking about science and physics, it's very much valid. Right? In such kind of a scenario, how should we deal with institutions? So this article talks about one, what are the opportunities available for India in the new global order. Here we are only talking about India and US, but I am extrapolating this article for any international relations issue, and I am talking about a scenario where India positions itself as a global leader. What does it take for India to position itself as a global leader? This is what we are trying to understand. Okay, so the article talks about three major issues. One is, see, I particularly like the intro of this article. I want you to read this. I'm reading it out. An autoimmune disease occurs when your body's immune system treats its own healthy tissues as invaders and attacks them. Look at how you beautifully use different concepts. See, in your essay writing, sometimes you have to learn from editorials, right? When the very immune system that exists to protect you is destroying you, that is an autoimmune condition. This comparison, this analogy of how US is destroying its own institutions, it's like cutting the branch on a tree on which you are seated. And this is an opportunity. Instead of cribbing about it, the author says we have to use this opportunity, and that is what strategic autonomy really means. And you have a very short window of opportunity. Do you really think the American citizens and the investors there and the universities there will continue to let this happen for one term after the other? No, right? They will want their way. That is the power of democracy. If things are not fixed, anyway he is going out of power. Because as per the American Constitution, a president can only have 2 terms. There is less likelihood that he will get re-elected unless and until he decides to change the constitution, which is not so easy. So we have a short window of opportunity to fix our foreign policy. It's an opportunity. A crisis somewhere is an opportunity for India. You have to look at every crisis like an opportunity. And this applies not just for countries but also for individuals. Every crisis will give us an opportunity to reinvent. Of course, it is very painful. It is very slow. But you have to put that intent. You have to show that intent to progress forward. You cannot, stop there. So in the short term, India will definitely suffer. We are not ready for this kind of situation. We have to use that opportunity. The 3 areas where US is strong, that's getting weaker. Globally, economies are no longer willing to depend. For example, see the strategy of China. It's silently decoupling from US economy. And that's why dollar price is falling across the globe. Because US had a lot of dollars, it is dumping them in the market. As long as supply is constrained, only then dollar will have value. If it is abundantly available everywhere, obviously dollar will fall down. So in response to how China is dealing, India should also respond, right? We have to become stronger. Otherwise rupee will get weakened. That is also happening. So this article says we have to use this opportunity to work on our universities, to work on our engagement with the global south who are facing the pressure, to become the voice of the global south, and work on our economic relations and strengthen the economy and the institutions. Economic reform schemes like Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, all this should develop quickly. Invest on human capital, skills, etc. Basic funda. Same, even in foreign policy, first strengthen India. Then you no longer have to depend elsewhere, right? Let's say, for example, you don't have that resource. Yesterday we spoke about critical minerals. We don't have critical minerals. We don't have crude oil. What should we do? Right now we are depending on crude oil. If you want to depend on critical minerals, at least reduce the dependency. Are we moving in that direction? Are we working on investing in R&D where we can recycle the same material? Why can't India become the global hub of critical mineral recycling? This is the next window of opportunity for India. Are we moving in that direction? This is the area where you will create a lot of jobs. Are our universities getting ready for the transition? Energy transition will just not happen like that. It's not like you will replace a petrol car with an electric vehicle and things will be automatically fine. How do you service it? How do you manufacture that battery? How do you fix that problem of software upgrades? You need to have skilled professionals to service that car. In the absence of this kind of back-end work that Indian government should do or any state should do, foreign policy will also become less effective. Both should go hand in hand. This is the framework of thought I want you to develop. Clear? India's AI ambitions needs bipartisan consensus. Parliament must be brought in. See, the whole point is, last year we have had India AI mission. Some budget is allocated to that. What is happening on that front? How are we spending that money? What are the outcomes? There needs to be a debate on such an important technology. We should have a vision that is in alignment with global standards. Today we have, many people actually trolling Indian, software engineers, because India is considered to be the software capital, supplier of the software engineers across the world. Best of the best talents. For example, an AI application called Perplexity. I don't know if you know this AI tool called Perplexity, that is headed by an Indian, a South Indian, who migrated to the US and is developing the technology there. Sundar Pichai has Indian origins. Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, has Indian origins. We take pride in the fact that on social media everybody is like, oh, it's so great that most of the top CEOs are Indian origin. Do they feel that affinity to India? Do you really think if they exert their Indian identity there, they will get accepted in the US? No, right? They will prioritize whatever identity that gives them. So they might have an emotional attachment, but they will be forced to act only in the interests of their company, whatever works for that company. It's pointless to take pride. Same kind of messages will keep on circulating. For example, when Kamala Harris was, competing, Indians are like, oh, she's an Indian. Fact is, they don't care. They don't care. And it's a shame that if India is taking pride in people who left the country, this is what it is all about. I go back to the same line. कोई भी देश perfect नहीं होता है, उसे perfect बनाना पड़ता है. It's a dialogue from a movie called Rang De Basanti, and this is my personal take. I'm just imposing my personal take. You're free to agree or disagree. Country becoming great doesn't mean building great institutions, as in, big buildings, or having something worthy of showcasing on a global stage. That is important. That alone is not going to make it. I'll take a recourse and tell a Telugu line by Gurjada Apparao. Desamante matti kadoi, desamante manchalo, which roughly translates into, a nation is not just about the territory and the soil therein, but it's about empowering the people to express their potential. In the absence of an accountability mechanism for such an important technology, where we don't know what are the steps taken, because this is a technology where, more than anything, the speed with which we work is going to give us the advantage. There are many trolls on social media. When China is building DeepSeek, the best thing that we can think of is just virtually absent from Indian imagination. Can you tell me an Indian equivalent that is on your fingertips, just like that? DeepSeek. US has OpenAI. China has DeepSeek. If India really wants to retain its strategic position as the global hub of software engineers, what do we have? People were joking, we have AstroTalk. That is the most famous AI app according to app downloads in India. That is not wrong, but that is not enough. Go back to the foundations of how AI is built. Does India have its own model? And even if India has its own model, is there a follow-up or a system or a company that is working on making it better every day? Why does it take an American company to give us training data in Telugu or Hindi or English or Tamil or whatever language to suit the Indian needs? What is the guarantee that those large language models do not have a bias against Indians? We are talking about getting rid of colonial mentality, but there is no follow-up in action. I'm not criticizing the government here, because in a democracy, in a limited budget, in a limitation of resources, outcomes should be measured. There should be progress on outcomes. In this mission, there is no transparency and accountability there. How is the money spent? Do we have a strategy in place? Is it working? What to do to make it better? This needs to be followed up from time to time, and we need better consultation, because you cannot expect government functionaries to master AI. That's not their forte. That's not their strength. It is the private sector that needs to take the charge here. How do we identify a private sector that will not distort the market to gain a competitive edge and compromise on the values of India AI mission? That should be the focus of the government, because the very philosophy of government is minimum government, maximum governance. Government involvement should be to the tune that they will set an end objective, make AI accessible to the entire country, so that people will figure out how to use it and make it stronger. See, we all have cringe content on social media, which might be popular, but we also have some space for beautiful creators who are very imaginative and created opportunities for themselves. Technology can be democratic. Access to technology should be democratic. Otherwise, it will create inequality. And we need to act fast. The role of the state in this is to respond. There is a difference between reaction and response. Reaction is immediate. It's not well thought out. Response is well thought out, structured, and curated. India needs to respond quickly. What does it take to respond quickly? With accountability. You need people who understand this AI game better. And I still think we might have, a delay, but we can catch up very quickly, because we should believe in the capabilities of our people. They just need, supporting environment. And these kind of things should be in public policy domain, and discussions should happen. More young minds should participate in democracy. They should come out and vote. They should come out and discuss, because the future of this country, when 55% of this country will have young people, the future is in their hands, and they disconnecting from democracy, whether they're civil service aspirants or not, is immaterial. They cannot afford to disconnect, because you see today a scenario where a lot of people from Telugu states move out of this country to the US, UK, Europe, Australia, whatnot, in a hope of a better lifestyle, better livelihood. And situations are not good there either. There, as much as 23% of the Indians who went back in the last 5 years are coming back with a loan, Somebody might be, rich enough, they want to retire, that's fine. But look at the data. There is an alarming rise in college debt. 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs. Imagine having 40 lakhs debt with no job and you're supposed to come back and pay that debt. Imagine the kind of pressure they must be facing. Imagine the kind of situations they will be in. We must do something, right? Read the article in that context. So this is about your generation. See, this Gen Z is a term, and how society is changing. This is not really important from how would I say, exactly translating this into an article, relevant for UPSC preparation directly, but it is relevant in the case of GS1 Indian society, changes happening in demography. So you can link it to yesterday's concept of demography. So what is the lifestyle of a certain segment of people who are born after 2010? Actually, take a look at this article. This is something that can be discussed separately. I will anyway summarize this, but you read this article in the context. Some other day I'll be discussing this, but read this article just like that. What is the takeaway from this article? There is a technical definition of Gen Z. How their lifestyle is all about consumerism. Savings are reducing. The lifestyle is very exorbitant. And how that is putting them under a lot of pressure. There is a comparison of Indian understanding of Gen Z and the world, the different generations. So link it to demography. Yesterday, whatever concept we discussed, read the article in that. It's self-explanatory. It is linked. Your demography is linked to economy. We discussed this already. So just to understand it better, read this article. This one. Farm crisis made in China. The other day we were talking about phosphate fertilizers. Same article, same context. Phosphate fertilizers are important for India, but China is blocking them to use them in other areas, other industries like e-vehicles. Of course they will do that because it is important for them. How will India react? How should India react? This article is a criticism on that front, that India is not showing the sense of urgency there. Consistently, if you are in this, it's not easy to be in power. Imagine you being the head of the government, you open the newspaper, every single article is criticizing you. Imagine the kind of efficiency with which the system should work. It should not depend on an individual alone. The system should be built with processes, with metrics, with accountability frameworks, and that's when the nation becomes formidable. Articles like this should not bother the leader. Articles which highlight the problem and they not being fixed should definitely bother them. If it is all about the process. That's why even in the preparation I always say, always focus on the process. The process is all that is there, and that is what you can control. Clear? That is the agenda here. And finally, one last article. This one. See, all these articles, this is the Tamil Nadu initiative yesterday we were talking about, right? Same thing here. I won't repeat. Maharashtra Urban Maoism Bill. Regarding this, I will be posting on the Telegram channel. The overall funda here is, how will you react if the very government which is supposed to protect the rights is going to suppress dissent? This is one side of the argument. Same repetitive argument again and again. freedom of speech versus national security. In the case of internal security, state governments will have more say because it is more the situation of state government. I mean, law and order is a situation that needs to be controlled by the state government. So Maharashtra came up with a law which is talking about urban Naxalism. What is Naxalism? It's a ideology driven by the fact that they want to use force, coercive method to overthrow democracy with an intent to replace democratic systems with a philosophy of communism where people are given the power. Now you might be wondering, isn't that what democracy is all about? Yes, but their ideology is state control, just like how it is in China. Maoism reflects the idea of Mao Zedong. It's a failed ideology, it didn't work for China itself. So this extremism gathers its response. I mean, during the times of the socialist era, where there was a lot of corruption, where there was a lot of casteism, where there are huge access to barriers, where there is state apathy. In those conditions, I somehow, this is my personal feeling, I can understand why communism can thrive in that kind of conditions. People were willing to let go of their lives for what they believed is right. I have that respect. But having said that, the philosophy and their methodology is not working anymore, because it has failed to yield results at any point of time. Violence cannot be an answer. And that is the reason why Ministry of Home Affairs takes up left-wing extremism as a important internal security issue. Go to Ministry of Home Affairs, download the annual report. The first document will always be about left-wing extremism and the updates. If that phenomenon, which was more or less confined to jungles, rural areas, is now moving to the urban areas with an intent to disrupt governance systems, there is an urgent need to relook at that, because it is the responsibility of the state, the political concept of state, sovereignty, territory, all that are there, right? And India ensures that security is provided through state governments, through the concept of federalism. And Article 246 gives that responsibility to the state government. So they are free to make their own laws depending on the local needs. So the Maharashtra government felt, okay, there is a rising trend of this so-called urban Naxalism, which we have to control. What are the methods that the government is using? Previously, the present CM was, back then, a year ago, was a deputy CM in the previous government. When that bill was introduced, there was a lot of criticism. One, about the members who are a part of the institutions that this bill will create. And two, it is about the vagueness in definitions. For example, if the law says that, one second, I'll read the exact, what are the provisions of the bill? What are the provisions of the bill? The bill gives the the bill gives the government of the power to declare any suspect organization as an unlawful organization. You need to clearly define the criteria, right? Say, when you say this organization is a Naxalite organization or something, there needs to be clarity on why you are saying that it is a Naxalite organization. So the bill says 4 criteria. For one, 4 criteria. First one is, you are for being a member of an unlawful organization. So take a look at this. Unlawful. You are a member. How do you establish that? How is it established? There is no clarity. So for example, there is a banned organization. Some terrorist organization is there. Do you think they will take a membership card? They'll pay a fee and take a membership card. You have to establish. For that, you need to have a rule of law. So civil society bodies are a bit concerned about laws like this. Any law, not just this law, preventive detention, or any law that has too much power needs to be scrutinized, because in the name of national security, which is supposed to be a reasonable restriction under Article 19, governments can create any law which will curb those freedoms, but they need to be within what is known as doctrine of reasonableness. Doctrine of reasonableness. Okay. So you need to see this doctrine of reasonableness, which is the funda of reasonable restrictions. When you have this unlawful membership, that is also not clear. When not a member for raising funds for an unlawful organization. So you say you are not a member, then why are you mobilizing funds? Let's say you start an online campaign saying that please donate for this organization, and you claim that you are not a member. Why are you doing it? That organization is known for supporting anti-India activities. Why are you supporting it? That is one of the criteria. Third criteria, when you are managing or assisting in managing an unlawful organization, operations part. And fourth criteria is for committing an unlawful activity. Unlawful activity. The problem is in the definition of this unlawful activity. See, I am not asking you to remember the provisions of this bill. Look at what kind of issues can create problems. Usually any bill that will curb freedom will be about the vagueness of definition. You cannot anticipate every future event, right? So the law defines certain principles under which you will see those. So what is the problem with this unlawful definition? It is vague. In the absence of clarity, you will suffer. And this issue is not just relevant for this issue of urban Maoism. Anything that is related to fundamental rights, freedom, any fundamental rights taking a back seat, where state is getting more power, that will become an issue. It is in this context, read this article. It is not important to by heart the provisions per se, but observe why this is a problem. One more thing is, it is about who will be a part of the institutions that this law will create to decide this body is an urban Naxal body or not. If government is appointing that person who is the head chairman, where is the separation of powers? Don't you think there is a conflict of interest? Let's say if a politician feels that this guy is, disturbing a project, I'll just throw him in jail, citing national security concerns. Where is checks and balances? So this was a criticism which was fixed, where the head of the institution or the committee which will decide this is now ex Chief Justice or judge of a high court, so that there is balance, checks and balances. Observe this design. Don't try to by heart the details, because it will not stick in your mind without you observing these details. This balance between checks and balances and separation of powers is always the constant theme in any polity issue. Checks and balances, rule of law, transparency, accountability, funds, functions, functionaries. Polity is over. Clear? This is how GS2 paper should be read. This is all that you have. There are problems, there are solutions. The methodology to arrive at that problem is there in fundamental rights, rule of law. The methodology to ensure governance is already established. You need to give them funds, functionaries, and functions, that is legal powers, and ask for outcomes. How will you ask outcomes? Through accountability mechanisms, CAG, Public Account Committee, social audits. How to make it better? Through data collections, demography, up-to-date survey. How to make them better? GS3, technology, better real-time data. what will happen? Peace and stability in the society. Khatam. This is your preparation. I hope you got a context of how you have to prepare on a daily basis. This is how we will prepare on a daily basis. You will not be taking notes and summarizing on a daily basis. It's pointless. Internalize these principles and develop the strength to argue on the spot. And once you decide how to argue, you can pick up these examples here and there to substantiate your arguments, and that is how you are supposed to prepare. That is the power that will help you write answers quickly, respond quickly. Clear? That's it for the day. See you tomorrow.